Jams, jams, jams. Picture books and jams. Welcome, everybody, to PBJamz. Music and picture books, what a perfect sandwich. Squish them all together, what a yummy snack. PBJamz, yummy books and music. PBJamz, reading, writing, teaching. PBJamz, what a yummy treat. Jamming PBs all the time. PBJamz, songish books and bookish songs. Tips for music teachers, interviews and book reviews. A little singing and dancing. PBJamz, yummy books and music. PBJamz, reading, writing, teaching. PBJamz, what a yummy treat. Jamming PBs all the time. PBJamz.
Hi, folks. Thanks for joining us again for another episode of PBJamz, and I am here with Annette. Is it Pimentel?
That's exactly right.
Okay, perfect. Annette Pimentel, who is the author of a brand new picture book coming out in May, actually, and it's called Before Music. And this is a very, very unusual picture book to my way of thinking. It's not what we typically encounter in picture books. It is a nonfiction picture book, and so we're gonna dive a little deep into that today and chat about it. So thanks for being here with us, and Annette, thank you for being here with us as well.
It is totally my pleasure.
Such a fascinating book, really, really interesting. And so the book is classified as an oversized nonfiction picture book, and it definitely checks all those boxes. It has a unique structure for a picture book with a beautiful lyrical picture book text, which I love. That picture book text is so lovely. And then in the middle, like squashed in between each little really spread of the picture book is all of this content, like amazing amounts of content and information that really takes the book up a lot of notches, right? But it also just takes up a lot of space in the picture book. And so it ended up being, what is it, 70?
It's 80 pages.
80 pages. So again, not your typical picture book at all. So talk to us about how all of that kind of happened. Was this your vision for the book, or was this something that editors said, hey, let's do this? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, it actually emerged in a different way than any of my other books. So I have written narrative nonfiction where it's a story following a person's life. But I had gone to a conference and we'd been talking about expository nonfiction, and I was very excited by that idea. And so I set myself, a challenge to write an expository nonfiction book. And I was trying to think what I wanted to write about. And my children grew up playing musical instruments. And I had a daughter who was a violinist, and her violin teacher often talked to us about what the materials violins were made of. And she had a maple tree growing in her yard and all this stuff. And I found that really fascinating. And so I remembered that years later when I was trying to figure out how to write an expository nonfiction book. And so on the plane ride home from the conference, I wrote, it was actually a rhyming text about what things violins are made of, but it didn't really feel like it was substantive enough to be a book. And so I just put it away. And then years later, like about 7 years after that, I was at the National Council of Social Studies Teachers Conference. And I felt like I had come home and found my people. And so on the way home, on the plane home again, I was thinking, okay, I need to write for social studies teachers. And I was trying to brainstorm ideas. And I remembered that text. And all of a sudden, I realized that the text wasn't really about violins, that it was about the way people use the materials around them to make music. And that idea excited me so much, the idea that it doesn't matter where you are, there's something that you can make music with. And so I wrote a new manuscript. It's not rhyming, which is probably good because I'm not a very good rhymer. And it was many different kinds of instruments. but it was short. It was about 100 words long.
Okay.
And we sent it out to publishers. And Courtney Code, who is my editor at Abrams, she read it. And one thing I do when I make submissions is I really love back matter. And so I put a lot of back matter in it. And Courtney talked to me and she said, what if we like made the back matter the book? And so she and I talked about it. And I really loved the through line of having a text that you could read to very young children. Yep. And I didn't want to lose that. And I loved, and I thought that that also conveyed the idea that excited me more. But I also was really open to the idea of putting the back matter somewhere else. And so she and I, it started as her idea, and together we worked out this structure. And then we're greatly dependent on the design people at Abrams, who are wonderful. And I'm so happy to hear that you recognized like what the storyline was through. So you can read it a lot of different ways. You can just read it like to young children, just straight through like a picture book, or you can skip the picture book parts and just, if you're like, I have a grandson who loves details. And so I think he's going to really like those other pages, or you can do some marriage of the two. So it was, it's an example of a book that couldn't have come about without that collaboration that comes of working with an editor and a designer and all those people contributing something to it.
I love that. I love that collaborative piece. And I think that suits really well. And I was telling Annette before we started chatting with you guys that my word for this year is connection. And I think that's just another beautiful way that connection serves us, when we connect with the people that have a different vision for our art, our writing, our pieces of literature, and then they can take it up another level. And that certainly is what happened with this book. And I love that format. But it is very, very different from anything that we see, which I think is so encouraging for the authors in the audience, because, you know, we hear all the time, well, these are the rules, you know, this is how you have to write a picture book. It has to follow this format. And so it's always exciting to us to see folks like you that are breaking out of that box, and it's not, you know, the traditional, what we're used to seeing. So we get excited about those kind of things too, and the fact that you're being successful with that. And so that just makes us want to shout hallelujah.
Yeah, you know, and I think editors are really excited by that as well. There's at least in my recent submissions, there seems to be a real interest in unusual structures and unusual approaches and into expository nonfiction.
That's awesome. That is awesome. So you mentioned that your children played musical instruments. How about you? Do you have musical training in your background?
So I took piano lessons when I was growing up, and I played the viola in junior high school, but I'm not very good at it. So I feel like my main connection to the world of music is as the parent helping kids practice. So
Gotcha. Yeah. So this idea of organology, like that was even new to me as a music teacher. I was like, oh, that, like, I learned a new word. So thank you, Annette. That was really cool. I'm a word nerd since I'm an author, but also about music. And so that was really cool to be introduced to this idea of organology and how musical instruments are arranged in all these different ways. And in Western music, we tend to focus on, you know, woodwind, percussion, brass, and strings. And so, wow, that's loud. Sorry, I didn't think of from outside. Sorry, guys, I'm trying something new today. I'm outside, so I apologize for all the extraneous noise. But, but yeah. So, how did you become interested in that particular piece of that organology? And you've got a few different actually layers in the book that talk about, there are some different ways, and I think you did a nice job of marrying. So here's a way to organize them, that's what things are made out of, what the instruments are made out of, and here's another way that you can, because you do talk about those four traditional Western organizational pieces as far as the orchestra goes. So talk to us a little bit about that piece.
Yeah, so that actually, my interest in that actually emerged from working on this book. So when I was doing early drafts of the book and took it to my critique groups, then one of the big questions is like, how should this be organized? How do you make it a structure that makes sense? And everybody in my critique group said, you should do strings, woodwind, brass, all those things, which is great if you're talking about Western music. But I was really interested in that piece that everyone in the world makes music. And so it didn't feel like that would serve that. And so I went to the university library that I live near, and I started poking around in the right, Library of Congress number. And I found these books, and that's how I pulled off a book, and it was about organology. And I thought, that's what I am interested in. And I was really fascinated. It was one of those mind expanding moments where I thought, oh, there are different ways that people in the world have organized musical instruments. And so I think of the two main organizing principles that I used in the book were it's loosely based on the Chinese system, which is by material. And that fit really well with what I was talking about. I added some extra ones like found items. So I wouldn't say that this is the Chinese system, but inspired by it. And the other one is, I think it's Indonesian. It's another Asian system, is how you play the instrument. So like whether it's plucked, whether it's beaten, whether it's whirled, and so there are all these different ways that you could do it. And so within the book overall is organized according to materials, and then each material is further organized according to how you play it. But there were other systems too, like there's a system about whether the instrument is intended to be played as a solo instrument, as a duet, as a trio, or with more people, just interesting things. And I loved learning about those because it like makes me look at the world in a different way, because I'm so used to like knowing that, we have the trumpet set, the brass section here, the string section here. And instead it kind of expanded my mind. And I thought, oh, like we can like put things together in a new or different way. So I hope that that's exciting for kids, but it was definitely exciting for me.
Yeah, it is. It's very, very, very interesting. And I love that. So cool to think about. I mean, I'm used to teaching, the four sections of the orchestra, but I think it's so cool because a lot of the instruments, when we talk about, like when I do my music around the world unit and we talk about a lot of those Eastern instruments and stuff, that's not traditional orchestral instruments. And so it's nice to have another way to talk about those and to classify them. And I also love that it really opens up for the kids creating their own instruments, which is another layer that you've built into this book, is that there's a lot of different, there's some craft pages that teach them how to make, but it's also the idea of here's this person somewhere in the world that has picked up a stone, a rock, and they've used it to make music. And so for me, that just really opens up kids that may not have access to traditional forms of music lessons or music experiences, but it opens it up to say, yeah, whatever you have around you, you can use to make music, which I think too. Are you familiar with like Stomp, the musical and the, and so all that found, music. And I think the kids love that. And I think that's a great marriage that could happen, for teachers that want to use your book in conjunction with those kind of performances would be a really awesome way that they could use that for sure.
Yeah, it also has made me like look at instruments in a really different way, because it makes me think, oh, like how did someone come up with the idea of using wood in this way? And I think human ingenuity is just amazing. And the idea that we feel impelled as a species to make music, I think is so beautiful.
Yeah, it's so integral to the human experience. It is such a part of who we are. And I think the fact that babies sing often before they talk, and they're humming and they're, they're babbling, and it's very musical before it's ever. And the fact that they respond so early, even in the womb, that they respond, to music. And so I think you're right. I think it's just so much a part of who we are as human beings that we are compelled to have music in our lives. And it really is universal. Like it's a totally universal, even if the specific languages are different, the language of music is absolutely universal from around the world. So you and I talked a little bit about this before, but you have a wide range of nonfiction books on very different topics, like widely various. So
Yeah.
how do we know? So Annette was saying she gets a lot of her ideas on planes, right? So, but how do you come up with those ideas? Where do they come from?
Um, yeah, so this book was an airplane book for sure.
Right.
So I don't know. I don't think that getting the ideas is necessarily the hard thing. I mean, I think they're all around us. And, people will give me suggestions of people, except for this book and my next book, which is a sequel to this book. So far, I've written biographies. And so people will suggest names of people they think are interesting. And that's how I've done some of these. And I keep a long list. So I have a document on my computer titled with the year, and I start, keeping my list. I think the hardest thing is figuring out if this particular idea is the one I want to work on. Mm-hmm. And so for that, I look for, I think, probably two different things. And one is that there's something in the story that just really viscerally appeals to me. It's something that I feel that little shiver that like I want to go tell somebody about it. And actually learning about organology, I was already working on the book, but it was definitely that. We had a family reunion as I was doing this, and I made my whole family sit down, my siblings and all their children, and I told them all about it. I was so excited. And when I have that kind of feeling about a topic or a person, then it's a good chance that I can make it into a book. And the other thing is whether I can have access to the research that I need. Mm-hmm. So if there's an archive that has the papers of someone, or if there's some way that I can get the information I need. So even if it's an idea that excites me a lot, if I can't figure out how I would do the research, then I know it's not worth putting a lot of time into, because I need, to do nonfiction, you have to have the facts right. So I look for those two things, kind of that shiver of excitement and of wanting to share it, and then whether or not I can credibly do the research.
Got you. So passion and resources, kind of the two.
Yes.
Yeah. Passion.
Very well stated.
Yeah, I love that. And that again is a great thing for us as authors to think about, especially as we delve into nonfiction. I do a variety, so that's mm-hmm. good for me to hear.
Yeah.
So the target audience for this picture book is also very different, because typically we see ages 4 to 8 or 3 to 8 or 3 to 6, or but this one is actually 8 to 12. So this is definitely on the mm-hmm. upper end of mm-hmm. the picture book spectrum, 2nd grade through 6th grade. So when and I know the book has yet to come out. May 24th, is that?
May 24th, yeah.
May 24th is actual. So you guys mark it on your calendar. But yeah, so what do you envision? I was glad to hear you talking about different ways to read this book, because I think mm-hmm. there's so much. It's not a book that you can sit down and read all 80 pages, probably to any audience. Like, yeah, in the first place, it's not all meant to be read aloud. Right. You have these lovely sections that are these craft sections. And then, but you do have this lovely lyrical picture book text that does run through. And so in your vision for school visits, do you envision just reading that part to the younger? And would you do school visits for younger kids with this book?
Yeah, I think I would. And I do hope that, I do think nonfiction picture books skew a little older than other picture books. But I do agree with you that this book definitely is going to appeal to older children than most of my other picture books do. But I think, although it does say on the publication thing, 8 to 12, I think younger kids would enjoy the simple picture book text. And so I guess I'm hoping that this is a book that will grow with kids. I know that we have books on our shelves that have appealed to our kids at different ages for different reasons. And I think a book like this, where it's oversized and where there are different kinds of materials in it, are the kinds of books that, they can be a good gift because they'll last for years. And so I am happy to do school visits, both to younger kids and to older kids. They would be different kinds of visits, as you imply. But I think that there's stuff for both ages.
I agree. And I'm always curious when and I know that's a publishing decision that we don't have any control over.
Yeah.
But like I always question, why we put such limits. And I guess
Yeah.
I know it's to help people purchase well.
Mhm.
Um, but to me it's so limiting because I do think this book would work beautifully for younger
Mhm.
kids, that little lyrical text that runs through, but all the way up, and I think way beyond 12-year-olds, because I was fascinated by that stuff and I
Oh,
learned a lot of new stuff in there. So, which, I do tend to think that picture books are for everybody, right? I don't think you outgrow
I
picture
do too.
books.
Yeah. Well, thank
So
you. I'm so glad to hear that you feel like it would work with a broad range of ages, because that was my hope.
yeah, I mean, I can see high school music teachers using this, or even
Mhm.
college professors, using music appreciation. Like, I think this would be an
Mm.
awesome supplemental text for, early college
Mhm.
music appreciation courses or high school music appreciation courses. I think that would be a fabulous tie-in. And so I think it certainly would go up, but I also think that beautiful lyrical text would easily go down as far as preschool and kindergarten without any problem. I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah. So what do you think was the hardest part of writing this book, Annette?
Hmm. Uh, there was a lot of research to do, just the sheer amount of research. And, I'm not an expert. So I tried really hard to make sure I had credible sources. So that was difficult. I think the very hardest part, though, was the very hardest but most satisfying part, too, was coming up with the organizational structure to hang it all on. So I really struggled at first with that, with how to set it up and how to connect to them and show their connection. But it ended up being a really satisfying part of it too. It took a lot of different drafts to find it.
I can imagine that it would. Yes, definitely.
Mhm.
But I think where you landed was a good place too. And again, that's the value of collaboration, critique partners and
Mhm.
editors and all of that, because they can give you that feedback and help you know when you've landed on the right one or when there's one that's not quite there yet, but almost. Um, Anything else you wanted to say about that? It sounded like you were going to follow up.
No, I think that was it.
Okay, I didn't want to cut you off. Sorry. So I know Before Colors is coming, and you mentioned that
Mhm.
that's the sequel. So is
Mhm.
that a similar organizational strategy to that book as well?
It is. They're going to be partner books. So they use the same page design. And you've seen the page design, so you know how but it's about how pigments and dyes come from the materials around us.
I
Yeah.
love.
And that was another one. I'm kind of amazed at how much effort as humans we've put into music and to color. It's been like a big part of many industries, both of them. So, yeah, it's a remarkable thing about the human spirit. Beauty matters.
It does, and I think legislators would do well to pay attention to this and to understand how
Yeah.
important the arts are to us just as human beings, and that if we leave that out of our educational system, that it's not gonna produce beautifully well-rounded people, and it's not going to
Mhm.
provide them with the training they need to to enjoy these things that are integral to being human beings.
Yeah.
I read something really beautiful a few times about, why we teach music. And it's not really about, because we think everybody's going to grow up and be a music teacher, right? It's just because we want them to enjoy music. And the same
Mhm.
is true for art. We want them to just know how to enjoy that for the rest of their days. It's
Yeah.
not about whether, I mean, I tell my kids all the time, I teach you rhythm not just because I want you to join band or chorus, although I would love for you to do that. But like, it's just so when you go to middle grade dances, you can dance, you know how to move to the music, because you've learned about rhythm. And if you get nothing else but that, and knowing that, golly day, there's a bunch of different kinds of music. My kids love bluegrass music. They didn't know about bluegrass music,
Yeah.
before we talk about it. And so I think that I wish that the people making the laws and putting things down the pike would take a lesson from these pieces of research that you're finding that say, man, the arts are absolutely important to who
Mhm.
we are as people. And even if you don't make your living from them, that you still need to have a way to enjoy and enlighten your life with them.
Yeah, and I think the human experience bears that out. It's so endemic around the world. Yeah.
Yes. So before Colors is coming out, was it 23?
Yes.
Yeah. And so do you have anything else coming down the pike right now that you can talk about?
We have books out on submission, but no contracts right now. So
Got you. But lots of good stuff coming, I'm sure.
hopefully so.
Yes, that is so wonderful. Listen, guys, I don't know about you, but I have so enjoyed learning more about Annette's process for this book. And when you have a chance to see it, you're totally going to understand why. So many layers. You know, as authors, we hear all the time about integrating layers upon layers upon layers. And if you need a mentor text for that, then this is the one that you need to take a look at. And if you're
Sorry.
yes, that'd be awesome.
I have one copy right now. So this is it. It's big.
It is big. Yes. And beautiful. It's a lovely, lovely book. And for music teachers, there's tons and tons of ways, whether you're teaching K2 music like me, or whether you're teaching middle school or high school music. And for classroom teachers, there is a wealth of information, especially as Annette mentioned early on, if you're teaching social studies or a regular classroom teacher that teaches everything in the elementary grades. Just so much wealth of information in there. So please be sure to check it out. Request it from your library. Do reviews for Annette. Order a copy as soon as you get an opportunity. It's coming out May 24th. Thanks so much for joining us on this episode of PBJamz. Annette, thank you for being here. And we will see you guys next time on PBJamz. Thanks.
Thanks so much.
PBJamz, yummy books and music. PBJamz, reading, writing, teaching. PBJamz, what a yummy treat. Jamming PBs all the time. PBJamz, songish books and bookish songs. Tips for music teachers, interviews and book reviews. A little singing and dancing. PBJamz, yummy books and music. PBJamz, reading, writing, teaching. PBJamz, what a yummy treat. Jamming PBs all the time. PBJamz, jams, jams, jams. Picture books and jams.